Hey, I'm assuming this works. Yeah, I'm back. So as you can see on screen here, I've been quite busy over the I don't know when I last streamed, but yeah. Oh my, I don't want to hear myself. I'm back. So I hate doing that. I always have that unmuted. Anyway, I learned how to make this little helmet, this Megaman helmet, and I don't know. I've been having a ton of fun with it. So right now, what I'm doing, I'm such an idiot. I don't want to ruin the effect, but I already ruined it. Let me just show it to you. So comes in, changes all these colors. You know, it spins around and then it fades out again. So what I'm doing right now, because well, I have no idea why I'm doing this, but here's what I'm doing. So, and this is gonna look very complicated. Don't be scared of it, okay? Just there's something wrong with me. I spent way too much time on this, but all of these, just to sum it up, so there's what, 10, 11, there's about 11 Mega Man games that I'm going through for the classic series. Mind you, there's many more to this series, but yeah, so just to sum it up, Mega Man 1 has 6 weapons. That's not 6 because there's a default color there. 6 weapons, and then every other game after that goes with 8 and 8 and 8. So what this is doing, in order by the way, because it has to be, I don't know, it has to be in order. It's basically cycling through, so like as this helmet rotates, I can't remember how this number changes, but as it cycles through, it goes through every game. So from Mega Man 1, it'll be Cutman, right? And okay, let me just bring up this little timeline. I don't want to waste too much time explaining. I kind of want to work on this little icon thing I've been working on, which, as you can see, is it's transparent and it's floating a little bit, kind of like a hologram. Anyway, what I wanted to show you was, so okay, from frame 0 to frame 60, you know, it fades in, but then you'll see here, or you won't. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so right now this value is at 1 or 1056, whatever. Number 1. That number 1 comes into here. Okay. This is so stupid. Let me, yeah. I'll just try and explain it this way. So as this number changes, it's selecting, so this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it goes through all, like, okay, so let me just hit play. Let me just show you. It's going through a bunch of color schemes, and they're all not only are they in order, but they're also as they appear in the game. So this, I don't even know how to explain this properly, but I'm just trying to explain is this little icon here that you're seeing corresponds to each of those colors. So if I rewind this all the way back, you'll see it's, well, I gotta tweak this. This is the normal helmet. It shouldn't have an icon. But as it, and yeah, okay, so it just needs tweaking. It needs, I don't even know. I'll figure it out later. But what I'm saying is every color change should correspond to a different value. So that gray helmet, which is Cutman's, should be this cut icon, okay? And then when it switches, I think that's... Look, I haven't played the classic series, okay? I don't really know, but that is the next colors. So that would be Cutman. That would be that little like scissor icon. And then as it scrolls to the next one, I want it to change to this. Oh, that's a rock. Okay, so it's Gutsman. Yeah, I want this. So if you get what I'm, if you're trying to follow my rambling here, when it's gray, I want it to be the scissor icon, the Cutman icon, and then when it changes colors to the next weapon, I want that icon to also switch. So what I'm doing right now, what I'm in the process of, is trying to refine this little technique so that as it spins, that icon on his helmet should be rapidly changing to the corresponding weapon. Again, I don't really have to go this in depth with this, like, at all, but I don't know, I guess I'm just a little excited because I couldn't model this helmet at all when I first started Blender, which was about a year ago, but now I can, and now I'm getting all these ideas for this little music project I've been working on. So just to give you a little sneak peek, I mean, it's like far from done, but I sort of want it like Mind you, this would be a different platform and it wouldn't be so shiny, but I would want something like this. So the music, it'd be like down in the corner or something like that, and you'll have like a music visualizer playing here, maybe some titles to tell you like. And remember, it's not going to be changing colors so rapidly. It'll probably just stay as a single color. I'm just testing it right now. But the idea being like, if we're on this guy's stage, I don't know what color or whose boss that would be, but it would essentially be like this color corresponds, and the little icon correspond. Or let's just say Quickman for example. Okay, this would be Quickman's color. It would display his icon, and I would have like a little title graphic that also states, which game he came from and the boss's theme. And then I would have like a music visualizer here. So if you can kind of imagine that, like it wouldn't look this bad. It would probably look a bit more refined, but you have this little like warping in effect. It rotates, the music's bumping, the music's playing, and you have a little title there. Then it just moves on to the next one. So I'm still figuring this out. I mean, like, I'm, I don't know. I just started like doing this like I think just only a couple days ago, but I did put in a lot of hours into this. So with that being said, I'm now gonna shut up, listen to these SCP stories, and then just continue on trying to refine this. Like I said in the description, this most likely will be a pretty boring stream. It's just going to be me struggling to plug and play these little nodes and like organizing them. So if it's not interesting, like I completely get it. You don't have to watch this. You can. I'm just warning you right now ahead of time. You can go do something else. Like this is not going to be entertaining at all. But it's been a while since I've streamed, and I did want to show off this little I don't know, this cool effect that I came up with. Yeah, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm done talking. So I linked this guy's playlist down here, the SCP Exploring series guy. So like I always say, I definitely recommend listening to these stories. They're just some of them are hit or miss, but I don't know. I like it for what it is. Okay, I'm done. With that being said, I'm just gonna shut up, hit play, and then work away at this. And like I always say, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll be keeping an eye on my little chat window. So okay, that's enough preamble. Let's just get into this.
The term rodent, often used pejoratively, refers to animals belonging to the order Rodentia, which includes mice, rats, squirrels, beavers, guinea pigs, and hamsters. Rodents, at their worst, are harmful pests, damaging food stores and spreading disease, while rodents at their best are lovable household pets. Of course, rodents are present in the SCP universe as anomalies, much like every other type of animal. We're going to take a look at several anomalous rodents, some dangerous, some far from it, but all of them pretty weird. First up is SCP-6369, which is not a rodent itself, but rather a Nokia mobile phone with a single number saved in its contacts list. The number is listed as Rat Lost and Found, and calling the number connects the caller to an automated selection system, which will ask a series of questions inquiring about a lost personal possession. These questions include what item the caller needs found, where they believe they may have lost it, and what form of payment will be given for its recovery. This service requires a number of conditions to be met, otherwise the system will instead play a pre-recorded message apologizing for the inconvenience before ending the call. First, the item has to be actually lost to the owner instead of intentionally hidden, or having a second person purposefully hide an object for them. Second, the item has to have been lost within the last 2 years, and can't weigh more than 5 kilograms. Third, the area that the lost item is located in can't have any rodent traps or predator animals, such as snakes, cats, or birds of prey. Fourth, the caller has to have payment ready before placing the call. The call must be placed on a weekday, and the service's employees must not be currently active elsewhere. If all of these conditions are met, one or more employees will manifest outside of the building the call was placed from, within 30 minutes. These employees will appear as a variety of fancy rat, all directing or driving an autonomous robotic vacuum cleaner. As far as the Foundation can figure, all of these vacuum cleaners were legitimately purchased at one point, and in some cases they had malfunctioned and the prior owner had intended to trash them. The rats will use these vacuum cleaners to knock on the door of the building by bumping into it. The number of rats present depends on the size of the building the call is placed from, with items lost in small apartments typically resulting in a single rat appearing. The largest noted response involved 60 rats, accompanied by 10 vacuums, in order to search a school. Upon arriving, they will proceed to dismount their vacuums and search for the lost item. Once found, they will place a call to the Nokia phone and carry the item to its owner, either holding it in their mouths or using their front paws. After it's returned, the phone will ring again, and an automated message will request a service payment ranging from $2 to $30. Should a caller not provide payment, the rats will leave without issue, but the phone will no longer function for that caller in the future. The payment doesn't have to be in US currency, however, as the rats will accept a wide range of items. They'll accept carrots, lettuce, tomatoes, blueberries, and Yogi's brand rodent treats just as freely as US currency. They'll accept chicken eggs if boiled, chicken and fish meat if it's cooked and unseasoned, walnuts if they've been cracked, beef if it's boiled and unseasoned, and melons if they've been cut into parts. Cheese is especially valuable to them if of high quality, but if there are multiple rats present on the call, they'll only accept food if it can be shared among them equally. They'll also accept high-quality rodent dry food, ham, salami, and turkey. They won't accept citrus fruits, office supplies, caffeinated beverages, high-value items such as gold watches or cell phones, and products associated with animal testing. A short log shows some of the lost items the Foundation tested the rats with. One rat found a doctor's keys in her office after 15 minutes and was given 1 strawberry as payment. 20 rats searched an entire site for a doctor's notebook for an hour and 38 minutes and were given $30 as payment. 17 rats found a doctor's eyeglasses in the same site after 38 minutes and were given 34 blueberries, 2 for each rat. It took 30 rats an hour and 40 minutes to find a doctor's coffee cup, which ended up being broken into 4 pieces and crudely glued back together, suggesting that someone broke it and tried to hide it. The rats were given a whole watermelon divided into equal parts for each of them. 10 rats took 5 minutes to track down a senior researcher's lunch, finding it in another doctor's personal fridge. The rats were given the apple and pear from the lunch as payment. A maintenance technician lost his wrench, and a single rat appeared, climbed up his leg, and pulled the wrench out of one of his pockets. The rat was given 5 peas as payment. After using the phone 20 times, a notable rat appeared in front of the phone's containment locker, wearing a miniature headset. The rat was contained and assigned to junior researcher Perry due to her familiarity with the care of its species. This rat will disappear from its cage whenever the rat service is active in a nearby location, appearing at the active search site and seemingly directing the other rats, using squeaking and limb gesturing. It will also handle distribution of food rewards among the rats. It will then reappear in the holding cage after the task is complete. Using a computer with a keyboard, an interview was able to be held with the rat, who stated that its name is Iro. Iro says that they perform this service so that people will know that rats are clean, and good animals. Iroh had a human companion before, but he doesn't know where they are now. This human taught them to find lost items, along with some other tricks. He doesn't mind staying here, as long as they can help keep finding lost stuff. Iroh was placed in a large cage in Perry's office, along with a non-anomalous fancy rat to keep him company. Neither Iroh nor the accompanying rat seemed to be aging, despite the common short lifespan of rats. The Foundation determined that the phone originally belonged to a Mr. Adrian Silverton, an elderly retiree who passed away in 2019. Silverton ran a second-hand electronics shop, and his family described him as an advocate against the negative stigma associated with pet rats, as well as an amateur software app developer. The Foundation found a side room filled with empty small mammal cages, which the family explained as Silverton's animal sanctuary for surrendered pet rats. The family claims that all of the rats disappeared when Grandpa Silverton passed away. That was definitely more on the lovable side of rats, so let's try something a bit more on the pest side. SCP-027 isn't exclusively about rodents, but rather it's a phenomenon that affects a single human at a time, causing them to be constantly surrounded by swarming vermin that are drawn to their location. The subject does not appear able to assert any sort of control over these vermin, and is in fact prone to occasional attacks from the creatures, as well as those that come too close to the subject. The creatures will mostly disperse whenever the subject leaves.
Okay, I gotta chime in really quick. Not to ruin the flow of the video, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. Assuming yeah, okay, perfect. So, this weapon select value is the exact same value. Hard to navigate this. It's the exact same value as... I don't even know where it went now. Oh, it's... okay, yeah. It's this purple value. So if you'll notice, as the timeline plays, this purple value starts changing, and that's what changes these colors. So the way I was setting it up is that when it's a blue helmet, the default at 0, it won't show any image at all. That's what that orange outline is. That hovering hologram thing. So when I move a few frames, okay, so when that hits 1, it's kind of hard to see just because of that light shining. But okay, so when this value hits 1, this helmet changes to gray, okay? And it also displays Cutman's weapon icon, so you can clearly tell, oh, okay, this is Cutman's weapon, you know, hence the colors and all that. But when the frame advances just a few more seconds, where's that, I just demonstrate it. just so it's easier to understand. So it's at 1.8. So just to summarize, okay, at 0 it's default. When it hits 1, it goes to Cutman. So what do you think 2 is gonna be? When it goes to 2, it changes to Gutsman. So this is exactly what I wanted to try and do, and you'll notice that it's just a transparent image that just hovers above it. But I mean, you can't really tell the difference from back here, can you? But that's exactly what I wanted to do. So now that I have a proof of concept that it can select, you know, it switches the icons as well, all I have to do now is start creating more and more of these functions that basically, let me give you a good example. So I only have to do this. So like I said, this will most likely be a pretty boring stream. So again, I don't blame you if you just leave the video or you don't want to watch. I don't really care. I just want to kind of document what I'm doing here, and it's exciting to me. So I mean, okay, whatever. I'm done rambling. I'm gonna get back into the video and just, I don't know. I just had to interject. This is exactly what I like about this project. It's so sick. And I didn't come up with this on my own. I followed tutorials and random videos, but I should have done this like years ago. All right, that's enough.
Leaves a location, but once arriving somewhere else, an initial swarm of flying insects such as gnats and flies will begin to form a cloud around them within a few minutes. Shortly thereafter, other creatures such as lice, cockroaches, worms, spiders, mice, and rats will begin to appear. More and more of them will appear the longer the subject stays in one location. If the host of this phenomenon should die, it will then transfer to another individual. How the phenomenon transfers and how it decides whom to transfer to is unknown, and so far only 2 individuals have been host to it while in Foundation custody. It's likely that this phenomenon has transferred a large number of times in the past, with research indicating that it's been around for a century at the very least. The Foundation first discovered it in the 90s, finding a subject living in an abandoned warehouse that had been completely overrun by rats, cockroaches, and other vermin. The subject is a Caucasian male in his late 30s, gaunt, filthy, and covered in bites and scratches. He shows symptoms of degraded mental health, which isn't too surprising given the situation, evidence of heavy use of alcohol and illicit drugs, and signs of prolonged sleep deprivation. He's taken into containment, but doesn't live much longer. After his death, an autopsy revealed that there were a number of creatures inside of his body, including a colony of rats nesting in his abdomen for a number of generations. A few days later, a security officer with the Foundation reported being awoken by breathing problems due to a large housefly having crawled up his nose, which was later shown to have laid eggs. The officer was designated as the new host of SCP-027, kept alive to ensure that the phenomenon didn't transfer to any high-value personnel. Simple, but horrible. Continuing on. SCP-1318 is a phenomenon that affects an estimated 0.0001% of a specific strain of Norwegian brown rats. These anomalous rats are normal in every way except for one. Humans that spend 20 to 80 cumulative hours in close proximity to one will develop a delusional complex. This complex includes the delusion that the rat is sapient and capable of speech, and that the rat is an expert in the person's field of employment. They'll believe that their best ideas come from conversations with the rat, and that possession of the rat provides a significant competitive advantage, so that they won't want to share data about the rat with outside organizations. They'll also believe that the rat's unique properties are possibly hereditary, and that any offspring should be exempt from experimentation pending unspecified analysis. In addition to the cumulative exposure, anyone that is introduced to the rat by an affected individual will immediately be affected by the same delusions. Recordings of the apparent conversations between an affected individual and the rat reveal that the individual is in fact simply sub-vocalizing the rat's responses to their own questions. None of the responses were found to lie outside of the knowledge of the affected individual. This phenomenon was first discovered when a routine performance review in 1993 found that productivity at the Biosciences Laboratory at Site 27 had declined by 75% in a 6-month period, without a corresponding decline in research quality. Investigations revealed that the entire staff of the lab were affected by delusions pertaining to a male rat whom they had dubbed Frankie. 2 members of the investigating team were likewise affected before the nature of the anomaly could be determined. All of the affected personnel were interviewed and treated with amnestics, although 15% of the staff suffered from persistent delusional states, and were subsequently relieved of duty. During an interview with one of the affected researchers, he states that Frankie is real easy to talk to and has a great head for organic chemistry, like nobody he's ever seen. He had been getting really stuck trying to synthesize a component from an SCP, and while complaining about it to a fellow researcher, they suggested that he run it by Frankie. The other researcher led him into a mostly empty storeroom, where a rat sat inside of a large cage. The researcher began to speak to Frankie, and Frankie apparently began to speak back. He says that you'd expect a rat like that to have a squeaky voice, but Frankie just sounded like a regular guy. After explaining to Frankie what he was trying to accomplish, Frankie walked him through a possible synthesis as easy as giving directions to the grocery store. The directions ended up working, so the researcher continued to consult with Frankie, along with most of the other researchers in the lab. They all figured that Frankie was their secret weapon, as everyone was doing amazing work, so they decided to keep it to themselves. The reason that productivity fell is because Frankie sleeps for half of the day, and the researchers ended up not bothering to do anything without consulting with Frankie first, because they would end up having to start projects over after Frankie corrected them, so why bother starting them on their own? The other reason productivity fell is because many of the researchers were busy with the breeding program, with the hopes that every lab in the Foundation would someday have their own Frankie. On the one hand, it makes sense that the Foundation would shut down and contain any sort of mind-altering anomaly, as there's no telling how far it might extend or what it might suddenly start to alter. On the other hand, it seems pretty beneficial, and the Foundation would probably benefit from having a Frankie in every lab. Moving on to something far less comprehensible, SCP-1555 is a facility built into a mountain with an unknown origin and purpose. It appears to occupy nearly the entire interior of the mountain and extends an unknown distance below sea level. Seismic surveys and ground-penetrating radar have mapped out some of this interior, but the internal layout has been known to shift in minor ways. The structure of the tunnels of the facility culminates near the peak of the mountain, at the very top of which is a steel tube, which extends out of the mountain. This tube extends 3 meters out at a 27-degree angle, and appears similar in construction to the barrel of a modern 155mm howitzer. The tube has been observed to change shape, however, with microscopic observation of the tube during transformation indicating that iron crystals appear on the surface of the tube with no discernible source. These transformations typically manifest as an alteration to the muzzle, such as a muzzle booster or recoil brake, although other changes have been seen. The facility will, at unpredictable time periods, launch a projectile from this tube. The projectile usually travels at the standard muzzle velocity for a 155mm howitzer, but variations have been reported. In almost all cases, the shell lands intact in a valley 6 kilometers northeast of the mountain, and releases 5 to 16 Robertson's field mice. In most cases, the mice appear completely indistinguishable from natural Robertson's field mice, with a 50-50 gender division. Usually the mice show normal genetic deviation, but around 15% of the shells contain genetically identical mice. After the mice are released, the shell generally corrodes into dust within 2 hours. We're given a list of some of the deviations from this common practice, however, such as a shell that released 2,000 mice, or one that did not follow a parabolic trajectory, instead flying out of Earth's atmosphere and past the orbit of Mars. Once, the tube fired 10 mice without a shell, with them landing scattered across the valley. One shell contained only 10 mouse skeletons, while another was pushed out of the tube only by compressed air, landing directly in front of it and releasing one mouse. One shell contained a tangled mess of PNP bipolar transistors, and another time the tube fired 48 shells in extremely rapid succession, all containing 3 mice. One shell contained chlorine gas instead of mice, and another shell released 5 smaller shells mid-flight, each containing 1 mouse. Another shell continued traveling into the ground after landing, traveling an unknown depth into the earth. Another shell released mice continually for 3 hours, while another exploded in midair, releasing metal fragments similar to an ordinary high-explosive artillery round. A Foundation agent was sent in to investigate, eventually going missing while in the tunnels, so an MTF was then sent in to find him. The first thing they comment on is the sheer number of pipes present throughout the facility. They then mention how clean the facility is, with all of the pipes being shiny and no dust present. They enter into a larger chamber filled with more pipes, along with some valves, some of which are labeled. One is labeled as makeup gas, while another says emulsion. After drilling into some of the pipes for samples, they find out that some of them are vacuum pipes, others contain steam, the makeup gas seems to be lead vapor, and the emulsion pipe contains an unknown, thick yellow substance. The air in the facility is revealed to be exactly 75% nitrogen and 25% oxygen. They proceed deeper into the facility, eventually coming across a section of low radiation, which their suits protect them from. Soon after, they find a larger chamber with a machine in the center, with many pipes leading into it. This was revealed to be a standard United States naval reactor. One of the team begins to drill into a pipe leading into the reactor to take a sample, with the spectrometer revealing it to contain uranium hexafluoride. Before they can seal it off, however, the pipe suddenly increases in pressure and the gas bursts out over the agent. They proceed to run away from the reactor, swearing about the pipes, with the agent saying that he'll get cancer from this, but he'll live through today. They all agree to not touch any more of the pipes, and they continue on. Soon they find another chamber, this one opening up onto a large shaft that extends diagonally up and down, with a big bundle of pipes suspended from the ceiling going down the middle. There are a number of warning signs nearby, with one in German, and they learn that the atmosphere in the chamber is pure helium, with no physical divider between the hallway and the chamber. Once they moved into the chamber, however, all of their electronics died, aside from their internal microphones, forcing the base to communicate with them through Morse code. After sitting there for a moment, though, all of their electronics spontaneously start on fire. Despite this, base tells them to proceed, but turn back if there's obvious danger. There's a stairway cut into the side of the shaft that they decide to take, and they hear wind blowing down the shaft. After traveling down for some time, they come across a doorway where they find the upper half of the missing agent, smoothly cut at the waist. They soon find what cut him in half, however, as a section of the hallway in front of them is filled with thin wires, which slice the front of one of their rifle barrels as they walk forward. They find the lower half of the agent on the ground, in small enough pieces that it looks like sand. They decide to turn back and proceed up the stairway instead, with the wind now blowing up instead of down, and growing in intensity. When they go to grab onto the stairs railing, it melts in their hands. Eventually, the wind grows strong enough and begins to blow horizontally, knocking one of the team off the stairs, where she's forced to grab onto some electrical lines that are running along the side. Unfortunately, the wires are hot enough to start burning through her suit, and before long, they reach her skin and fry her. The wind begins blowing down again, so they make it back to the hallway they entered the chamber from, but the hallway is now proceeding in the opposite direction as before, although their tether cable is still attached. The walls in the hallway have also changed, from concrete to riveted steel, painted matte olive. After moving through the hallway, they enter into another chamber, this one containing a large lake with a number of pipes leading into it. The lake appears to be a mile across, with halogen lights along the ceiling the entire way. There are blue lights underwater, and it looks like the lake is filled with nuclear reactors. They take a sample of the water and send the results back, which triggers a number of radiation alarms upon arrival, prompting base to order them to leave immediately. The team scrambles and follows the tether out of the chamber, coming to a rest a few minutes later. After one agent leans against a pipe on the wall, however, it falls off, releasing thousands of mice into the hallway. Another agent begins swearing again about the pipes and starts firing at them, with one pipe releasing a white, billowing cloud. They're forced to move through the cloud, which is extremely cold, and begins to ice up one of the agent's suits. Before long, he can't bend his elbows, and his oxygen tank becomes exposed. His lungs start freezing up, and eventually he can no longer bend his knees. He falls to the ground, causing his visor to smash open, and he's instantly killed. The others soon make it out of the cold, finding the other end of the pipe that the agent knocked loose. It looks empty, but there's a whooshing noise coming out of it, and soon a bunch of mouse hair starts spewing out of it. The two remaining agents continue following their tether for half an hour, coming into another chamber 5 or 6 stories tall. The walls of this chamber appear to be covered in what looks like asbestos halfway up, and there's a single pipe sticking out of the ceiling. It drops an object which shatters when it hits the floor, and upon closer inspection is revealed to have been a mason jar filled with a yellow powder. They send a sample back and are informed that it's half sulfur and half tree pollen. Continuing along the tether, they find a wall covered almost floor to ceiling with open pipes, and after moving closer, they realize that the pipes are all rifled, like gun barrels. They attempt to scramble out of the way as an enormous amount of automatic gunfire erupts into the hallway for 5 minutes. Afterwards, one of the agents informs Base that he's the only one left alive now, and there's 5 inches of lead stuck to the wall. By now, Base had withdrawn 12 kilometers of tether, despite sending in only 1,400 meters. Regardless, Base tells the agent that he's close to getting out in order to keep up his morale. Unfortunately, the agent follows the tether to the end of the hallway, where the cable leads into a small pipe, 3 inches in diameter, sitting in the middle of the floor. At this point, the agent realizes that he's never leaving this place, so he tells Base that he's going to end things using his sidearm, and that there's a box under his bed with a note inside he wants delivered to his brother. He tells them to not send any more people into this place, not even D-Class, as nobody deserves this. Base tells him that he performed admirably, and they're sorry. The agent proceeds to cut the tether, and the log ends. Afterwards, over 60 kilometers of tether were pulled out, and no further exploration was performed by non-expendable personnel. Of course, there are plenty of expendable personnel. Extremely weird, with no explanation whatsoever for who built this facility and why, although the surrounding area is said to be home to one of the few remaining populations of the fictional Robertson's field mice. Since that's the type of mice most commonly fired out from the facility, perhaps some anomalous organization was just really interested in keeping that species alive. So far, all of these rodent SCPs have either been singular entities or contained to a somewhat isolated area. Let's end by looking at an SCP that takes things to a bit larger of a scale. SCP-6668 refers to a large sinkhole that suddenly appeared in the floor of a Foundation site's cafeteria. It appeared at 8:47 local time, and since this document was created at 8:58, the situation is ongoing. The depth of the sinkhole has yet to be determined, but is architecturally anomalous, primarily due to the fact that the cafeteria is located on the 3rd floor, and there's nothing out of the ordinary visible on the 2nd floor. When the sinkhole appeared, due to the cafeteria floor rapidly crumbling, junior researcher Morell fell into it, and contact has yet to be made with him. More curiously, once the sinkhole appeared, all food product within the cafeteria, including substances in people's mouths and stomachs, rapidly putrefied. Security footage shows the cafeteria filled with people during the breakfast service, and a small circular mark spontaneously appears on the floor in the center of the cafeteria. As junior researcher Morell gets up to return his tray, he steps upon the black mark. Instantaneously, the floor gives way and collapses inward, rapidly expanding until it is 5 meters in diameter. Despite the nature of the collapse, the hole formed into an oval shape with well-defined edges. Morell is the only individual to fall into it, as others quickly moved away. Simultaneous to this, all food in the vicinity rapidly decayed, with the food in the serving unit sprouting large amounts of fast-growing mold. Several diners spit food from their mouths, while the majority began to vomit. Cameras located in the training auditorium directly below the cafeteria show nothing unusual, with the auditorium ceiling showing no signs of damage or degradation. Refreshing the document page gives us a new version of it, from 9:44 a.m. The sinkhole is now classified as SCP-6668-1, while 6668-2 is an adult human, formerly a D-class, that began to display anomalous properties upon returning from an exploration of the sinkhole. We're given a log of the exploration. The D-class was strapped into a harness, attached to a crane that was brought in to lower him into the hole. He says that it's real dark in there, and he can't see the sides anymore, suggesting that it's pretty big. After a couple minutes of descending, he begins complaining about the stench, which he states is worse than the moldy food up in the cafeteria. He descends for another 3 minutes, for a total of 37 meters, which would normally put him on level B5 of the facility. Suddenly, he's interrupted by a wet, squelching sound, and orders them to stop the crane. The D-class was dropped up to his waist into a black, viscous liquid at the bottom of the pit, which only became visible due to the disruption of his body. The D-class says that this black tar is where the rancid smell is coming from, but he can feel the floor underneath it, which he describes as soft. The area is still very dark, anomalously so, but he makes out a shape nearby that looks human. It's floating in the liquid, wrapped in a Foundation lab coat. The body is face down, but he thinks that it's Morell, so the site director orders him to grab the body and they'll pull them out. The D-Class begins to breathe heavily as he approaches the body, but when he grabs the lab coat, the mass contained inside of it splinters into smaller parts and begins to rapidly move. A splashing sound is heard as the smaller masses move into the liquid, and the D-Class screams that it's not Morell, and they need to get him out of there. The crane begins to start pulling him out, but his camera starts jerking wildly as he exclaims that something's in his suit. He plunges his hands into the liquid and begins hitting at his legs, but the crane throws him off balance and he falls face first into the liquid. The crane pulls him out of the pit, but he remains silent on the way up, and the camera is obfuscated by the liquid. Upon recovery, he's found to be unconscious, but before the medical staff could arrive, his body began to levitate. He's now currently suspended in the air above the pit in a non-responsive state, and sounds of movement are audible from the sinkhole. Refreshing the page again gives us an update from 10:27 a.m., with a video log showing the developing situation. A team of researchers stand around the D-Class when his eyes suddenly snap back and glance rapidly around, making eye contact with one of the researchers. He begins to try to speak, so the site director stands on a chair and leans near his mouth. As his lips slowly open, a small paw pushes through them, followed by the rest of a large, wet rat. The rat crawls out of the D-Class's mouth and falls to the ground, quickly scurrying away. Immediately afterwards, a wet, slurping noise comes from the D-Class, and a second, larger rodent starts to crawl out of his mouth. Unnoticed by the researchers, small red dots begin to appear on his uniform. His right cheek begins to bulge outwards, and apparently a third rodent has crawled up his esophagus, fighting with the second rat to get out. The D-Class's left eye then collapses in on itself into a white, damp pulp, and from within the socket, another rodent begins to emerge. The D-Class's right eye is rapidly darting between the researchers. The red dots on his uniform continue to grow as one of the rodents in his mouth manages to claw through his cheek, pulling itself through and falling to the floor. Another rodent can now be seen crawling up his throat. Without warning, a large laceration forms on his right wrist, spraying the site director with blood and causing him to fall off the chair. A rodent begins to crawl its way out of the laceration, followed by another. More and more rats pour out of his throat, now numbering around 50. The bones around his left eye have started to crumble, allowing space for more rodents to emerge. The flow of rodents from his wrist has intensified to the point of severing his right hand completely off, and other rodents are now crawling out of both of his ears. The number of rodents in the vicinity is in the hundreds now, with a number of them swarming over the fallen site director, who's unable to stand. As another researcher tries to help him, the rodents charge at him as well, crawling up his legs. He flees from the area after apologizing to the site director, followed by the other researchers. The D-Class's skull has lost most of its structural integrity, and rodents are continuing to emerge from it. His uniform then ruptures open, releasing a flood of rats into the room that chase after the fleeing researchers. The rats tear into the site director's skin and attempt to climb into his mouth, which he can only prevent for so long. Eventually, one gets in and begins crawling down his throat. The rest of the rodents then begin flooding out of the cafeteria, quickly overwhelming the 3 site security personnel that were sent in to help. The site director's body begins to convulse as it also levitates into the air and starts to discharge rodents in a similar manner to the D-Class. So far, estimates figure that between 1,200 and 1,700 rodents have emerged from the two, and sounds of movement and squeaking are audible from within the sinkhole. Another update brings us to 1156, which tells us that all personnel in the site are to evacuate, with floors B4 through 6 of the site to be considered lost. SCP-6668 is now the designation for anomalous rodents that originate from the sinkhole. They are to be considered hostile, lethal entities that will attempt to enter the body cavities of any human they encounter through any external body orifice. If they are unable to do so, they will create an artificial orifice through the use of their teeth and claws. These rats replicate through these human hosts, but anecdotes relating to a mimetic effect compelling individuals to willingly offer themselves to the rats are currently unsubstantiated. The site where this all occurred is currently undergoing a Code Black security breach, with the site being evacuated and MTF Lambda 12 Pest Control ordered to come in and contain the anomaly. When trying to access the log of the MTF incursion, however, we're informed that the incursion was cancelled. A notice informs us that by O5 authority, the evacuation order has been overridden and all staff are to shelter in place. The site has been placed under quarantine and the MTF has been withdrawn. Another update to the document from 12:09 p.m. shows some hastily written text, apparently written by one of the researchers inside of the site. She's typing out a message from her phone and pleads for someone to unlock the emergency door as no one here is infected and the O5s can't just abandon them to die. She's interrupted, however, as the document refreshes and wipes out the text, now with a notice that informs us to disregard any restricted information we had been exposed to. The site has now been placed completely under quarantine, with no excursion allowed, and the O5 Council are currently deliberating on containment procedures for SCP-6668. Both the rats and their human hosts are to be considered hostile, lethal entities, and security footage shows the rats climbing on top of each other in order to climb out of the sinkhole into the cafeteria. A vote from the O5 Council concerns a possible containment proposal for the site. First, the site's Morpheus security measure would be activated, emitting an inhalable sedative gas throughout the site. Then, the site's Hephaestus security measure would be activated, incinerating the entirety of the site's interior, with the exception of designated containment cells. Finally, 8 hours later, MTF Lambda 12 would be sent in to confirm neutralization. All 13 council members agreed to the proposal, and were given another update from 8.5 hours later. No signs of life have so far been detected throughout the site after the activation of the two security measures. Curiously, the sinkhole is also no longer present, with the floor in the cafeteria appearing as it did prior to the morning's events. It's certainly rare for the Foundation to actually solve a problem with liberal usage of fire, but it seems like it did the trick here. Unfortunately, a rodent of unknown origin with burn wounds and scorched fur was recently sighted in a nearby city. Quarantine measures have been placed on standby, and excursion into the city is forbidden. Ah well. Hopefully that's enough rodents to last you a while, ranging from lovable rats that help you find your lost keys to rats that will help you lose your internal organs. Rats and mice in general are a pretty easy source of horror, as they naturally bother many people, and are often harbingers of pestilence and problems. There certainly aren't as many rodent SCPs as there are for dogs and cats, but there are at least a few particularly odd ones. SCP 3043 Murphy Law in Type 3043 for murder. Mysteries abound in the SCP universe, as that's often a key part of the SCP Foundation's job. Where do these anomalies come from? How do they function? How dangerous are they? And how do we contain them? Sometimes these questions are easily answerable. Other times, not so much. SCP-3043 is an interesting case of one anomaly helping to contain another, without the Foundation really knowing what happened. It's also interesting due to having a rather unique format, meaning this will be a rather unique video. SCP-3043 starts with an email from a Site Director August to the O5 Council, telling them that he's not quite sure what happened yesterday. Their bots picked up some unauthorized changes to documents on their internal servers, and 2 minutes later, every person on site blacked out for 3 hours, with every camera malfunctioning during the same period. When they woke up, they all had headaches. The entire site smelled like cigarettes and cheap alcohol. 2 of the site guards had been injured. There were 3 bullets lodged into the site director's desk, and someone had apparently shot SCP-3043. The only clues as to what happened during that time come from the documents for SCP-3043, which have been changed. We'll get to what exactly SCP-3043 is later, but first, let's go through these updated documents, which now read as a film script for a noir film. It seems only right that I read this verbatim. Fade in. Interior, Murphy Law Detective Agency. Night. A light-skinned man leans back at his desk, feet up, reading a newspaper. He is clad in a white-collared shirt, with his trademark Trilby hat tossed thoughtlessly atop of his desk. We can see his shoulder-strapped holster. It carries a .44 Magnum. A bent cigarette rests between his lips. His name is Murphy, and he is ready to give anyone a bit of the business. He is hard and handsome, with the sort of face you could use to smash up concrete, then dust off and still take home to show your ma. He is also our narrator. His voice is a harsh growl, as if he just swallowed a fistful of spent cigarette butts and followed it down with a sulfuric acid chaser. You see a lot of ugly in this line of work. Good people with bellies.
I'm not gonna listen to this. I'm not gonna listen to that. I'm just gonna find something else.
SCP-4011. History is written by the victors. The SCP Foundation has a long and storied history of protecting the planet from anomalous threats. Depending on who you ask, they've been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, doing their best to secure, contain, and protect. There have been issues that have cropped up, though, and occasionally things like SCP-2000, which allow the Foundation to repopulate the planet, can make for a messy history. Typically, though, the higher-ups in the Foundation have a pretty clear idea of where their organization has been and what it has done. It can be rather surprising, then, when they stumble upon a Foundation facility that they have no knowledge of. Even more troublesome is the fact that it's not even located on Earth. SCP-4011 is a facility located within and beneath Victoria Crater on Mars. 4011 has a rather unique object class situation, as the document formerly marked it as a thaumial object, something that the Foundation utilizes to help contain other anomalies, but it has been changed to a Keter-class object. The only known entrance to this facility is an airlock located beneath an alcove on a rim of the crater, and although the architecture of the facility is similar to that of a standard Foundation site, the materials used to construct it seem to be of Martian origin. Additionally, the facility seems to be completely isolated from the outside world, with no form of communication functioning between the exterior and interior, and the internal atmosphere is comprised almost entirely of argon gas. Perhaps more notably, the Foundation believes the interior of this facility to be infinite in size. The facility was first discovered in 2006 by NASA during their remote exploration of Mars. Their rover photographed an artificial structure bearing the Foundation logo while exploring Victoria Crater, and Foundation agents embedded in NASA were able to quickly suppress the discovery. The implications of an unknown Foundation facility on Mars made it a moderate priority for exploration, but 2 remote exploration missions both failed due to the communication blocking effect of the facility, resulting in them losing contact upon entry. Manned missions were deemed impractical until 2049, when the Three Portlands Accord eased tensions between the Foundation and several groups of interest, and the Foundation was able to work with the group formerly known as Anderson Robotics to assist them in getting to Mars and building a provisional site there. Inside the facility are a large number of robotic entities, at least 3,800 of them, that are each individually sapient, but are also all a part of one large-scale artificial intelligence system. This AI, and by extension these robots, perform various maintenance and administrative tasks throughout the massive facility. The robots, as far as the Foundation has observed, come in 3 different forms. The first is a humanoid shape made of a polished metallic material, standing between 1.7 and 2.5 meters tall, lacking fine detail or facial features. These perform general maintenance tasks and communicate with other robots, possibly functioning as organizers during crises. The second form appear as sets of metallic spheres, generally one large one with a series of smaller ones trailing behind it. The smallest of these forms measure as small as 2 centimeters for their large sphere, with the largest reaching 1 meter in diameter. These spheres are capable of levitation and flight through unknown means, as well as receiving, transmitting, and jamming signals sent through radio frequencies and anomalous channels, although they themselves are not immune to the communication jamming effect of the facility. Their role in the facility seems to be data storage, transmission, and processing, as well as covertly extracting data and interfering with external computer systems. The third common form is that of small metallic pyramids, measuring 1 centimeter to a side. These are capable of utilizing an anomalous force to form materials around them into shapes, which they typically use for rough construction and repair tasks. They do not appear to be capable of fine manipulation of materials, but have been seen carrying up to 12 tons of mass, with multiple instances working together to carry even heavier loads. They have also been seen utilizing their ability to form shells around their bodies when traveling outside of the facility, and are capable of levitation and flight. There have been a number of other forms observed by the Foundation, but these are the 3 most common. The AI running the facility has demonstrated extremely in-depth knowledge of Earth's history, particularly the history of the Foundation, and has even shared detailed descriptions of previously unknown events. This information has been proven to be accurate, and info gleaned from the AI has been used to discover a number of other SCPs, as well as help to explain or assist in containing other SCPs. This led the Foundation to classifying the facility as a thaumiel entity, but eventually it was reclassified as Keter class, with no further communication or interaction allowed without direct approval from the O5 Council. We'll get to why that changed later, of course. In partnership with the former Anderson Robotics Company, the first team sent inside of the facility consisted of 3 androids, part of a special MTF due to the argon gas. They are soon approached by one of the facility's humanoid robots, who tells them that they've entered a secure SCP Foundation facility, and they should provide identification immediately. The team decides to try a Foundation handshake protocol, providing a challenge phrase, to which the robot provides the correct response phrase, and tells the team that they apologize for the formalities. It also mentions one of the team members' serial numbers, and asks if they require assistance in accessing the archives. The team is a little unnerved that this entity knew their serial number and the correct handshake protocol, so perhaps it's accessing the Foundation network somehow. The team lead asks when the facility was built, and by whom, to which the robot responds that it was constructed by the SCP Foundation, completed in the year 18,541, a date which the Foundation believes corresponds to our year 1552. The lead then asks what the facility is for, to which the robot responds that their mission statement was to maintain a comprehensive historical archive of the SCP Foundation and its subject peoples, and to maintain the security and sovereignty of the Foundation. It then cuts off and tells the team that the rest of the mission statement is classified. The team discovers that there are hundreds of other robotic entities in the vicinity, and they decide to withdraw for now, to inform their superiors about the level of knowledge contained here in relation to the Foundation. The Foundation conducted plenty more explorations of the facility from then on, delving into the wealth of information contained there. They found a 3,500-page biography of a prominent member of the Serpent's Hand that went into extremely intimate detail about their upbringing, philosophy, employment history, and activity. They proceeded to use the info to launch a raid on the target, capturing 25 Serpent's Hand members and preventing a planned assault on a Foundation site. They also found an SCP document for a Church of the Broken God object that went into much further detail about the object's origin. The expanded information led to the identification of several historical figures as church members, as well as a further understanding of the object's properties, which aided in containment. They also found a detailed report on an ethics committee investigation into the O5 Council, but the info has since been redacted, and everyone that uncovered it was given amnestics. There was an incident a few months after the initial exploration of the facility in relation to one of the androids on the MTF. Specialist Fenn was having a conversation with the director of the provisional site near the facility, and mentions that he is worried they won't have a Foundation to come home to after the war. Fenn says that he is sure they'll beat the Lodians and everything will be fine, but what if they don't, and they're trapped here for the rest of their lives? The director asks what Fenn is talking about, as the Foundation isn't at war with anyone, and proceeds to activate a silent alarm. Fenn continues, saying that the nation of Lodia is the largest threat the Foundation has ever seen. They've been at war for 3 years, and that's why they came here to Mars. The director speaks an override command that paralyzes Fenn as security staff enter, and the director says that one of them has been seriously affected by 4011. It's interesting that the director acknowledges that they could be the one affected by not having knowledge of this nation of Lodia, and both of them are placed into isolation. Similar memories of this nation of Lodia were found in all members of Fenn's MTF, which the Foundation proceeded to expunge from their minds. The idea that the facility is actively restructuring people's memories of past events is worrisome, and the rest of the document is sealed under Level 5 clearance. The secure version of the document provides a few more addenda for us, as well as revealing a bit more about some of the previously redacted things. Notably, one of the documents that the Foundation discovered within the facility is a 5-volume book series, consisting of over 20,000 pages, titled History of the Foundation, Middle Period. Each page has the words Pre-Revision Archive at the top, and the books detail an unknown ancient civilization referred to as the Foundation under SCP. This society is described as featuring a rigid caste system, ruled by a council of overseers, devoted to the containment and study of anomalous entities. They do this in service to a deity referred to only as SCP. At the height of this civilization, it encompassed over half of modern-day Europe, but it underwent conflicts with a large number of other civilizations, including the Davite Empire. The information contained in the volume does not match what the Foundation currently understands to be the history of the Davites, although that in itself is not that ridiculous, as Davite history tends to be a little fluid. The books finish with a war occurring between the Foundation and the Davite Empire in 1551, featuring a number of highly destructive anomalous weaponry, with the results of that war unknown due to the text being redacted. The Foundation was working to recover the text to discover what actually happened, but an incident resulted in the loss of the book series. Moving on, we see that the text in the document suggesting that 4011 is modifying people's memories has actually been striked out, with new text stating that later events contradict this theory. The fifth addendum is another exploration log featuring the same 3 androids from before, with the team lead granted temporary level 5 clearance in order to fully access the facility. The leader is greeted by one of the robots as an overseer and is allowed full access along with their team. They ask the robot what the full mission statement of the facility is, as they were previously cut off due to lack of clearance. The robot says that they are to maintain the security and sovereignty of the Foundation by retroactively neutralizing evident threats through Protocol Alpha 17. When asked about this protocol, however, the robot apologizes and says that they cannot discuss it further outside of the Alpha 1 array, referring to the lower levels of the facility. The team ponders the statement that the facility neutralizes threats retroactively, and they have a seemingly unlimited knowledge of history. The team eventually continues down below and makes it to a large reinforced door with a sign reading Alpha 1 Array in English and 2 other unknown languages. The team is led inside, entering into a long passageway lined with books. The room is also filled with the spherical and pyramidal robots, who are regularly moving books between shelves. The team remarks on how much radioactivity is happening in this room, as well as thaumaturgical, or magical, communication. The team has so far been speaking to one another through a digital connection, but their connection is suddenly breached by the administrator of the facility, presumably the AI. Despite attempts to stop the administrator from scanning their systems, it does so, until the team forcibly disconnects. Afterwards, they switch to normal voice communication, but the AI did have 3 seconds of full access to their memories. The team continues on, finding the book set on the history of the Foundation. The leader uses their overseer privilege to take the books along, and one of the team begins to read. They remark on the supposed war with the Davites that occurred in the 1500s, which would be well past the Black Zone for SCP-140, a book that can retroactively expand the history of the Davite Empire. In other words, this history isn't even close to what the Foundation's current history is, and Fenn suggests that perhaps this has something to do with retroactive neutralization. They continue on until they reach a large cylindrical shaft with a glass floor and ceiling. 7 other passageways filled with books extend out from this cylinder, and what looks like similar passageways exist both above and below them. The robot with them says that this is the Alpha 1 array, and their current directive of retroactively neutralizing threats to the Foundation is active. The robot continues by saying that these threats are weeds that seek to smother the light of SCP. In a time long past, they grew very nearly too high and nearly blocked out the sun of the Foundation. But now, with Protocol Alpha 17, they can tear out the weeds at the roots. As the robot mentions the Davites, it stops and stays silent for 10 seconds. Another robot speaks, saying that Alpha 1A has been identified, and they are initializing Protocol Alpha 17. The first robot speaks again, saying that there was no time long past. The weeds are not and never were, and SCP will always shine down upon us. They go silent again as a humming sound begins to emanate from the metallic tower in the center of the cylinder they're in. One of the robots then asks what SCP-140 is, and the tower flashes as the team's audio and video recordings become corrupted. Footage resumes 10 minutes later as the team is running through the upper floors of the facility, carrying the book series on the history of the Foundation. They all suddenly stop, wondering what just happened to their memories, and realize that since they seem to be running towards the exit, they may as well continue that way. The sixth addendum is where we get most of our info about what exactly is happening at this facility. The Alpha 1 array is a temporal modification device, capable of adjusting seemingly any event in history. The AI running the facility uses this device to purge various people and groups from existence by retroactively preventing their creation. They do this on anyone that presents an existential threat to the SCP Foundation. Obviously, it's pretty hard to detect when they use this, as they're completely modifying history. However, since those inside of the facility are immune to the history-changing effects, they keep detailed logs of all of the different timelines. This is what all of their books contain, the histories of every history. Earlier, Fen mentioned the nation of Lodia to the site director, who had never heard of it. This wasn't because the nation of Lodia didn't exist, but rather because it used to exist, and the AI changed things. The MTF still remembered the nation of Lodia and the war they were involved in because they were inside the facility when the AI changed history. Previously, the nation of Lodia was a covert society of anomalous humanoids that began to attack Foundation sites using advanced anomalous technology, escalating into full-blown war. With history changed, though, what everyone else now remembers is that the Foundation discovered the nation of Lodia shortly after their foundation, and quickly quashed it. All in all, this thing has done a lot of good for the Foundation, and it probably wouldn't have made it nearly this far without this facility, and the AI working to help. That being said, there are problems. Aside from the fact that the Foundation always gets a little jumpy about changing history, especially coming from an anomaly they're not in control of, the AI has an issue with SCP-140. It seems that the AI was not aware of this book before scanning the MTF's memories, but now that it is aware, it's continuing to make frequent requests for access to it. It has since revealed that it cannot change any parts of history that have already been affected by the book, and it cannot change history to prevent the book from being created in the first place. In other words, SCP-140 is a threat to our reality that not even the greatest threat neutralizer around can deal with. Additionally, since discovering SCP-140, robots in the facility have begun to speak less coherently, including an increased number of pauses and verbal glitches, as well as an increasing use of religious imagery referring to a deity called SCP. That brings us to the final addendum, an incident that began when a robot approached one of the androids who was stationed inside of the facility. The robot says that they have come to a conclusion regarding SCP-140. The object must be destroyed, lest it threaten the light of SCP. The Council of Overseers lie in the dark beyond SCP, and they are unaware. SCP-140 has intertwined itself too closely with them, and the Alpha Array cannot return the Overseers to the light. They want the book so they can destroy it. Otherwise, they may be forced to do something. That's a rather ominous threat from an AI in charge of a history-changing machine, but the O5 Council stands firm and rejects their request. Shortly after, the team lead of the MTF is denied access to the facility, and the nearby provisional site suddenly goes on alert due to an unexpected action by a contained anomaly. Not long after, a number of spherical robots emerge from the facility and move into the provisional site. The Foundation on Earth soon loses contact with the site, only learning a bit more from recovered logs gathered by the MTF. Essentially, what occurred was sort of a battle between the android MTF members and the AI, as the AI worked to wipe out the provisional site. It ultimately accomplished this by hacking into two of the MTF members and taking control of their bodies. Although the team put up as much resistance as they could, the AI breached the doors of the facility, compromising the internal atmosphere. 68 Foundation members died during the breach, with only the MTF members surviving due to being able to handle the atmosphere. The message is pretty clear then. This AI has declared itself as an enemy to the Foundation. It may seem to serve the same ideals as they do, protecting the world from anomalous threats, but the Foundation it serves is a far cry from the modern Foundation. A number of issues related to this are brought up by the O5 Council, and they put them to vote. They easily passed the declaration that SCP-4011 represents an existential threat to the Foundation. They also easily passed the declaration that recontainment of SCP-4011 is a top-level priority, and the declaration that this containment should be the primary responsibility of 2 of the O5 members. A bit trickier was the declaration that under no circumstances should SCP-4011 be permitted access to SCP-140. This narrowly passed, but it seems that the Council is pretty divided about whether or not to bend to this thing's demands in order to avoid being retroactively eliminated. Finally, the last vote was on whether or not the Foundation should, after containing 4011, begin researching how to control and manage the Alpha-1 array, eventually using it to maintain normalcy. They apparently couldn't come to a consensus on this one, and have delayed the vote. Well, sure, messing with history by retroactively eliminating threats is pretty messy business, but you can't argue with the results. The Foundation has been safeguarded, without their knowledge, for hundreds of years by this thing, and it probably would have continued to protect them for countless years more if they hadn't stumbled upon it. It does, of course, beg the question of what exactly happened to this mega Foundation civilization capable of building anomalous facilities on Mars. Presumably, this war with the Davites messed things up, and the facility wasn't able to completely fix it, but we'll never really know. Of course, the AI can modify histories in ways that the modern Foundation can't understand, so why hasn't it just modified things to go their way and have the book delivered? How can the Foundation hope to really combat such a threat when it can rewrite history to win any battle it wants? We're left without answers for these questions, but that's alright. They do say that history is written by the victors, but it's rarely taken quite as literally as this. SCP-3300. The Rain. Rain can have a variety of effects on people and places. A little rain while outside can be annoying, while listening to a little rain while inside. The Global Occult Coalition. One of the most common questions people ask when discussing dangerous SCPs is why doesn't the Foundation just destroy it? In some cases, it certainly seems like a good question, as it's strange that the Foundation would go to such lengths to contain something so dangerous when they could just kill or destroy it. The answer varies depending on the SCP, such as the Foundation has tried and failed to destroy it, or more broadly, it's just not the Foundation's way to destroy SCPs, as they are focused on securing things. But what if there was a similar organization that didn't quite follow the same rules, and did want to destroy these dangerous anomalies. This organization would be called the Global Occult Coalition. The GOC is its own part of the SCP universe, and someone could quite easily enjoy the SCP universe without ever reading much about them. However, there are a number of SCPs contained or known to the Foundation that have a link with the GOC, as well as a large number of tales related to them, far more than I could cover in this video. The purpose of this video is to just give you a solid understanding of who the GOC are and how they operate, so that you can continue learning more about them on your own. The first main event linked to the founding of the GOC occurred in 1882, when a group of German occultists managed to capture and destroy an energy entity that was being worshipped as a god by several Semitic tribes thousands of years prior. The destruction of this entity resulted in a psychic backlash in the area, causing feelings of nihilism in certain sensitive individuals, notably philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who wrote about God being dead, referring to the entity. This leftover energy was apparently going to be utilized by members of Nazi Germany during World War II to complete an occult ritual, known as the Rite of Solomon. Details during this time are sparse, but the event sparked the Seventh Occult War, although practically nothing is known about the prior 6, and afterwards led to the founding of the Global Occult Coalition, in order to prevent future similar events. Of course, the SCP Foundation already exists during this time, but they mostly act independently of any governmental body, and have very little oversight. The Global Occult Coalition, on the other hand, grew out of a desire from the United Nations to have their own organization devoted to protecting the world from the paranormal. Since no single nation could be trusted with the secretive handling of anomalous objects and creatures, the GOC was formed from the cooperation of 108 different paranormal organizations, including the Bavarian Illuminati, the Knights Templar, and the United Church of Satan. These organizations work with the GOC to cover a broad field of the anomalous and paranormal, and the United Nations fund the organization, as long as there is a degree of oversight from them. The GOC's mission statement, then, covers 5 different goals. Primarily, their first and most important mission is to protect the human race from any threats outside of the norm. Secondly is to conceal the knowledge of these threats from humanity to avoid panic and anarchy. Third, individual humans will be protected during the course of GOC operations, unless this mission interferes with the first 2. Fourth is the destruction of paranormal threats, as their existence goes against the first 3 missions, and no unnecessary risks will be taken to ensure their survival. Finally, the 5th mission is education, as GOC make every effort to learn more about the paranormal, unless it goes against any of the earlier missions. It's pretty clear from these mission statements how much the GOC differ from the Foundation, but their logic and intent is sound. The GOC operates through 3 separate divisions: Physics, Psych, and Ptolemy. The Physics division handle the actual investigation and capture or elimination of paranormal threats. The Psych division focuses on diplomacy and observation, and Ptolemy is the support division, handling logistics, management, and research into the paranormal. GOC operatives mostly utilize technology and weaponry that is readily available to militaries and other organizations, so that it wouldn't cause any concern if lost in the field. But they do occasionally use tech that comes from paranormal research to better aid in eliminating anomalous threats. These advanced pieces of technology also include combat and infiltration suits that incorporate bullet-resistant nanofibers, augmented reality systems, cloaking devices, or even full-body exoskeletons. Field agents are fully prepared to tackle the various threats they might encounter, and are capable of taking down highly dangerous anomalies, such as those capable of regeneration, shape-shifting, or even bending reality. Despite this preparation, however, capturing and eliminating anomalous entities is no easy feat, and GOC operatives are fully aware how likely their deaths are. So far, everything seems fairly logical. A well-funded, well-trained organization that have spent decades investigating and eliminating paranormal threats. So why doesn't the SCP Foundation adopt a similar methodology? To answer that, we'll have to look at a few specific examples, when the GOC especially messed things up. Likely the most relevant example is SCP-1609, a pile of wood splinters, nails, and scraps of fabric, currently contained by the SCP Foundation. Originally, 1609 was a large chair carved in the form of a reclining woman that would detect when anyone in an unknown radius around it needed to sit down and didn't have a comfortable seat nearby. The chair would then teleport to them and remain there until someone else needed a seat. This was the extent of its anomalous properties, but the GOC managed to capture it and send it through a wood chipper, as a teleporting chair could easily risk breaking the mission of secrecy held by the GOC. The destroyed chair killed a number of GOC personnel before suddenly appearing in an unused containment cell owned by the Foundation. SCP-1609 is now much more dangerous, and when reacting to specific stimuli will become violent, teleporting portions of itself into the lungs of those who have angered it. This quickly leads to death, at which point it will teleport back to its containment cell. Things that anger SCP-1609 include wearing clothing similar to the GOC uniform, usage of words or phrases utilized by GOC personnel, such as threat entity, the sound of a running motor, or anything overtly hostile to 1609 itself. To counter this, the Foundation believes that 1609 prefers situations where it can be useful to humans, as it once did as a chair, and so they use the 1609 mass as mulch for a flower bed. Part of the containment procedures mention that anyone who visits the flower bed must remark on the beauty of the flowers and the quality of the mulch. The report for 1609 ends with a document from a Foundation doctor who explains that 1609 is a cautionary tale of the flaws inherent in the GOC's operating procedures. He summarizes how it's a perfect example of why the Foundation contains rather than destroys, and says that when you destroy something, you can't go back on your mistake. He concludes by saying that this is why the Foundation is right, and the GOC are wrong. Of course, it'd be odd for a Foundation employee to say differently. SCP-2002 was a large spacefaring vessel, consisting of a spherical hull and roughly 3,000 small pods attached to it. Analysis of the vessel seemed to show that it belonged to the Foundation, although the current SCP Foundation only had designs under development that were similar to the ship. The vessel had come from an unknown location, and apparently went through some sort of temporal anomaly, but was traveling at a constant 12.5 kilometers per second towards Earth. This information and other basic details were relayed to the GOC through a covert operative working for the SCP Foundation. The GOC were not sure why the Foundation had no containment procedures in place for this SCP, but they decided that if the vessel came within a certain distance of Earth, they were planning to terminate it themselves, to avoid an apocalyptic scenario should it collide with the planet. As the vessel passed by our moon, a weaponized satellite belonging to the GOC destroyed the vessel, leaving only partial fragments to hit the Earth. These fragments were recovered by the Foundation, who also found a large number of human remains among them. The remainder of the SCP documentation reveals information that the GOC did not possess, as the vessel came from the future, where an SCP caused the global population to become sterile. The SCP Foundation decided to send a number of uninfected embryos, along with some Foundation personnel, into outer space, where they would remain in stasis for 135 years before coming back to Earth to repopulate it once the plague was gone. Unfortunately, the ship passed through a temporal anomaly, causing it to travel back into the past and approach our current Earth. Ultimately, this anomaly caused their mission to fail, but this demonstrated that the GOC still operated with lethal decisions, without possessing all of the facts. SCP-1522 is perhaps another case of the GOC being unnecessarily cruel in their operations. 1522 were two sentient fishing trawlers, capable of autonomous movement and faster than normal speeds. They spent most of their time sending out modified sonar pings to play with whales, and the Foundation continually kept civilians away from them, mostly letting the ships do their own thing. The GOC, however, came in and launched harpoon missiles at one of the ships, quickly sinking it. The other ship tried to save it, but could not, and seemed to destroy itself afterwards. The Foundation eventually recovered the two sunken ships, finding two small, partially formed rowing boats in one of them. While it might seem cruel, it likely took a good deal of effort to keep information about these two anomalous ships concealed from the public, and destroying them does fit in with the GOC's mission statement. I don't want to be misleading with this summary, however, and so I want to make it clear that these SCP articles are all written by Foundation personnel, who are likely to share a certain bias against the GOC. Looking at different perspectives, particularly in various tales, you find that the GOC are a bit more nuanced than just the common kill-all anomalies concept. These reports show the GOC are more than willing to negotiate with anomalous entities, or at the very least not destroy them immediately, and also aren't shy about showing the mistakes the Foundation makes. Since the concept of canon is so fluid in the SCP universe, it's understandable that you can't simply pigeonhole an organization like the GOC into a single perspective. Perhaps the GOC caused plenty of problems in their pursuit of protecting humanity by destroying the paranormal, such as in the alternate reality of SCP-1730. And perhaps the Foundation caused plenty of problems in their pursuit of containing and researching the paranormal. In closing, I hope that this has provided a good enough basis of understanding for the GOC to continue your own research. While the SCP Foundation will often paint the GOC as one of the bad guys, they have also been shown to work alongside them if need be, and there is mostly peace between the two organizations. In the end, if nothing else, it seems clear that the GOC exist for humanity's protection, whether we agree with their methods or not.
The throne was immediately inspected afterwards, now humming with power thanks to the power grid being online. A port was found in the left armrest that would fit the cylinders, while the right contained a depressed section molded around the grip of the fist. Nussbaum isn't so sure about letting Aram sit in the throne and plug himself in, but Aram trusts
Sarcasm. The nature of belief and faith is certainly a powerful one, regardless of the concept of a deity or deities, but even just looking at the power, control, and influence that believers can possess. From the widespread influence of the Vatican to the utter control of a small cult leader, faith has been a prominent aspect of our species for thousands of years. We've already looked at one religion in the SCP universe, the Church of the Broken God, but now we'll discuss their counterpart, the Sarkic cults. Sarkicism is another very large topic within the SCP universe, and this would be a very long video if I tried to cover it all. So let's just try and get a good idea of what Sarkicism is and why it has its followers. Sark means flesh in ancient Greek, which summarizes the overall belief system of the Sarkites, which is diametrically opposed to the Church of the Broken Gods theology based on technology. In fact, most Sarkites don't actually refer to themselves using the term Sarkic, as the term was an insult created by the Church of the Broken Gods' predecessors. That is not to overemphasize the Sarkites' opinion of the Church, as it is believed that while the Church views the Sarkites as a sort of biblical foe, the Sarkites seem to view the Church as simply another obstacle. The Sarkic cults are generally divided into two different factions that operate in vastly different ways, but follow mostly the same set of beliefs. The proto-Sarkic cults are those found in small, isolated communities across Europe and Asia. These communities are usually poor, superstitious, technophobic, and generally hostile to any outsiders. The Neo-Sarkic cults, on the other hand, are found in much more urban environments and can be difficult to differentiate from other wealthy city dwellers. They are usually upper class, coming from affluent families, and with no apparent objections to technology and modern life. Both cults, however, believe that one of the main concepts of Sarkicism is that one can achieve apotheosis, that is, becoming a god. It's generally accepted that Grand Karcist Eon, the founder and prophet of the Sarkic cults, did become a god through some sort of interaction with the primordial goddess, Yaldabaoth. Proto-Sarkites believe that in time, Eon will eventually provide them with godhood, and Neo-Sarkites believe that it must be obtained through willpower, and they must one day usurp Eon. This will-to-power concept is prevalent in Neo-Sarkites, and a common proverb says to do as you will to whom you will, as desire is the measure of all things. Both cults believe in the idea of sacrifice, but here they differ greatly, as Proto-Sarkites believe in the sacrifice of oneself for the benefit of the many, and Neo-Sarkites instead believe in the sacrifice of the many for the benefit of oneself. Either way, belief in cycles of destruction and regeneration is paramount to the Sarkic faith. Both cults often practice ritual cannibalism, human sacrifice, the worship and spread of contagions, and bodily augmentation. Grand Karcist Eon founded the Sarkic cults nearly 4,000 years ago, somewhere in western Siberia. The Sarkic timeline is muddy, even their recent history, but it's believed that Eon was born to a Davite mother and a slave father, as the Davites referred to him as a half-breed. Eon was a slave for much of his youth in the city-state of Adatum, possibly serving under an alchemist or priestess, until he led a slave revolt against the Davites. During this time, Eon demonstrated great power over organic flesh, both his own and others. Examples of this include transforming his hand into some sort of wolf jaw, capable of ripping through a metal jail cell, forcing others to act against their will, such as causing men to throw themselves on their spears, and could also gift these powers and other physical augmentations onto his followers. During this revolt, Eon was aided by 4 disciples, known as the Clavigar in the Sarkic faith, who would go on to be essentially saints. It's unclear how exactly Eon gained his abilities, but it somehow involves Yaldabaoth, a god or goddess believed by the Sarkites to be responsible for creating the universe, possibly through the process of giving birth to other gods, and then devouring them and exhaling the remains. Neo-Sarkites revere this god, but Proto-Sarkites seem to regard it as the enemy of all living things. Yaldabaoth is also joined by 6 other entities, known as Archons, which are described as manifestations of primordial chaos. It's said that Eon endured 6 trials given by the Archons, which allowed him to break free from the bondage of mortal limitations. In one text, Eon claims to have murdered Death herself and read the entrails of the Creator. Regardless of how Eon managed to become godlike, his slave revolt conquered the Davites, forcing them to recede, and the Sarkites built a number of cities, largely composed of organic material. The Sarkic civilization experienced its golden age and spread across Eurasia, with their capital being the converted kingdom of Adytum. Their civilization eventually spread into the Mediterranean, establishing a foothold here and colonizing the various islands. It was here where they would encounter the real resistance, however, as the Mechanites, the precursors to the Church of the Broken God, would rise up against them alongside other civilizations. This massive war involved anomalous technology, huge colossi, monstrous abominations, and 20 to 30 million casualties. The war ended with really no winners, as the Sarkic Empire broke apart and went into hiding, leading to a division in culture and theology. The Mechanites dwindled and eventually became the Church of the Broken God, and the devastation led to the collapse of the Bronze Age.
Okay, I'm gonna end it here. I kinda got carried away with this little this stupid setup, and I don't know if you've been paying attention, most likely not, but I ran into a little bug here I can't really figure out. So when I get to the end of 4, like Megaman 4, that value should be around 30, 31, and it's just fine, but I don't know how to explain it. It's like I'm just chaining all these nodes together. Anyway, my problem is at a certain point it just starts displaying like a pink texture, and that pink texture tells me that something is missing when it doesn't really make sense to me, because it's... Yeah, okay, here's how I'll explain it. Mega Man 1 to 4 will show their icons just fine, but right now what I'm showing is 5 to 7. As you can see here, they show just fine, but if I try to connect everything together, like if I connect 4 to 5, then I get that pink texture, and none of them work. So I either have to disconnect. So like basically it's like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I connect 5 to 7 on their own, they show up. But if I just connect 1 to 4 on their own, now they show up. And I don't know, I gotta figure this out. This is gonna bug me, and I know it. I don't know why I'm spending so much time on this little project, but I mean, in my opinion, it's cool. Like, I like the way it's been turning out. Like, just show you. I can barely like see this thing. What I'm saying is, if I go through I have to cut that connection. Yeah, so if I'm going to right there, so this is the beginning of 5, okay? So I don't know what that is, gravity or something. 5 keeps going, keeps going. And I think those are like the 6 textures. Yeah, well, I haven't really played the classic series, so I don't really... Well, I mean, I played the 7, so I know those color schemes, but... Keep going, keep going. Right here. So I know that's Freezeman's icon. I know that the color scheme to it. And that's from Mega Man 7. If I keep going, it goes to Junkman. I kind of like these 16-bit textures too. They actually look kind of nice. The little border and everything. Very readable from a distance. Anyway, if I keep going, then I go to Burst, or Danger Wrap, then Thunderbolt. Those wild coils. Slash, like Slash Claw. Noise Crush. And then finally a Scorch Wheel. Yeah, this looks so sick. But, yeah, so what I'm saying is, if I try to go before any of that, like if I go from 1 to 4, then nothing shows up, and that's because I disconnected it. So it's a bit of a convoluted problem. I'm gonna take a break, probably go to sleep because I have to go to work tomorrow. And yeah, I gotta think this through. Like here's my question: is there a limit to these nodes? Like here's what I'm thinking. Like just before I end the stream, My first impression was that, oh, there must be some limit as to how many nodes you can be connected in serial, I guess, like this, you know, like daisy chaining them. They're like connected one after the other. Like one input goes to the next one output goes to number two's input. Three's output goes to four's input. You know, like, you see what I mean? Like, it's just that outputs to the next one's input. So my idea was I could just connect these throughout all of them, right? And then it would work. And here's why I think that. If I go to these colors here, this is exactly what I did. Now granted, I didn't use that, well, I did use that group. It might be this node. So what I'm saying is, if you look at these helmet colors, it's going through every game. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't have 11, so that's just Megaman and Bass. But if you pay attention, like, look. First it starts. I'm too tired to even talk. But you'll notice, like, it's going through each and every one of these color schemes. All of them. And I'm doing the exact same thing that I did the other night. You get what I mean? So I'm trying to figure out why aren't these icon textures showing up. And yeah, it ends right there. Which should be Astromans from Mega Man Bass. Not important. What I'm curious is, like, why this isn't working, because I'm very close to figuring this out. If I can just get these stupid icons to work, then I'm in business. Otherwise, it's look at this. I like this effect. This looks so sick. Anyway, yeah, I don't mean to gush about this kind of stuff. I don't know. I mean, I've been working at this for like the last few days non-stop, so I'm like pretty excited and pretty happy about it. And just like look at it, like it looks cool. I like it. Now I would just wish that the rest of the series would be able to display, but I don't know. I'm gonna figure that out most likely tomorrow. So yeah, my idea is tomorrow is just gonna be another one of these streams. Pretty boring, pretty. I don't know, pretty. Sorry, I just can't stop looking at that. It's so sick. It's gonna be more of this. What I'm doing. Just zoning out and listening to that those SCP things. I'm almost tempted to edit these images now and add that border to it, but it's gonna be more work than it's worth. But yeah, I'm just gonna end the stream here now. I'm like really tired, so yeah. Hope you learned something. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this guys talk about SCP stories. I don't know. I'm just tired. I'm gonna end it here. Yeah, like I always say, if you have any questions, then yeah, feel free to contact me. Feel free to ask me. I'm not an expert on any of this, but kind of just put together, more like hack together some stuff based on some tutorials that I looked at, and it's not rocket science. Like, it's not impossible. It looks very, very confusing and very boring, but honestly, once you get into the workflow of it, it's pretty much just copy paste, and then yeah. Like I always say, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, and yeah, thanks for watching. And I don't think anyone was watching. I got like 5 comments from bots here, so I don't know. I must be doing something right. But with that being said, I'm gonna cut it here, and I'm just gonna end it. So yeah, I'll see you next time.